Most people do not lose control of their financial lives in one dramatic mistake. They lose it the way a boat sinks in dark water, through small leaks they keep calling normal. I have spent most of my life watching capital move. I have watched fortunes compound because money stayed inside the machine long enough to reproduce. I have also watched ordinary people work hard, earn decent incomes, and still wonder why freedom never arrives. They blame the salary, they blame the economy, they blame inflation. Sometimes those things matter, but more often the truth is harder to swallow. The hull is leaking. Years ago, when I started paying close attention to every dollar leaving my pocket, I realized something simple and brutal. Your financial life is not usually broken by one giant luxury. It is eroded by a series of respectable purchases that feel harmless in isolation. A little convenience here, a little entertainment there, a little identity purchase, a little loyalty, a little I deserve it, a little it was on sale, a little every own pays for this. By the time you add them together, you are not dealing with spending anymore. You are dealing with a structural leak. That is the part most people miss. They think wealth is built by heroic investment decisions. I have never believed that. Wealth is first built by pressure control before the engine matters, the tank matters, before return on capital matters, retention of capital matters. If you cannot keep money in the system, the compounding story never begins. You are trying to grow a snowball in warm rain. So when I say there are things I no longer buy, I am not talking about some monk, like purity ritual. I am talking about sealing leaks in the hull. Every one of these purchases taught me the same lesson. A dollar does not only have a face value, it has future value, decision value, time value, and emotional value. If you let dollars leak out for weak reasons, you are not just buying objects, you are selling future options. One leak I became suspicious of was the fake bargain disguised as experience. There was a period when short-term rentals felt clever. They felt original. They felt like the traveler had outsmarted the hotel system. You could tell yourself you were getting charm, space, local flavor, maybe even savings. That story used to be more believable than it is now. Over time, I noticed the arithmetic changing. Once you add the cleaning fee, the checkout rules, the scattered location, the grocery run, the friction of doing part of the host's job, and the loss of hotel points or status benefits, the supposed savings often disappear. What remains is not magic. It is hassle wearing a stylish hat. That is a leak I would call the novelty leak. You pay extra because the purchase flatters your self-image. You are not only renting a place to sleep, you are renting a story about yourself. You are the clever traveler. You are the off-the-grid person. You are the one who found the hidden option. But I learned to ask a colder question. Does this purchase reduce friction or add friction? Does it protect my time or steal my time? Good capital allocation is not about buying the most romantic narrative. It is about buying the cleanest result. If a hotel gives me predictability, service, point transfer flexibility, easier checkout, and a similar price, the charming alternative is no bargain at all. It is decorative leakage. Another leak comes from buying optimism in physical form. A lot of people think they are buying books. Many times they are buying a fantasy of the person they hope to become. I understand that temptation very well. A shelf of unread books can look like ambition. It can look like seriousness. It can look like self-improvement. But if the books pile up faster than the ideas enter your life, you are not building wisdom. You are building paper guilt. I learned to separate information from identity. If I can absorb the idea through an audiobook, a borrowed copy, a podcast conversation, or a digital sample, then the physical object is often unnecessary. The real asset is not the hardcover. The real asset is the change in judgment after I consume the knowledge that distinction matters. People clutter their homes the way they clutter portfolios. They confuse possession with absorption. They confuse access with mastery. They confuse intention with action. That is how money leaks. Not through stupidity, but through self-flattery. There is another leak that hides behind passivity, and that is loyalty without math. Insurance is one of the purest examples. Most people do not study it. They inherit it. They stick with the company their parents used, the brand they remember from television, or the provider they signed up for years ago when their life looked completely different. Then their behavior changes, their mileage changes, their city changes, their car changes, their risk profile changes, and the monthly payment keeps marching on as if none of it happened. That is what I call the loyalty leak. You are paying for the comfort of not rethinking the decision. Comfort is expensive. In a lot of households, it is one of the biggest invisible taxes in the whole budget. If your driving drops from 15,000 miles a year to 4,000, and you never call to reprice the policy, you are not being loyal. You are donating margin. One phone call, one comparison, 1 hour of attention can change the equation. People will spend weeks hunting for a better stock entry point and refuse to spend 60 minutes challenging a recurring bill. That tells you something. Most people do not actually hate waste. They hate the minor discomfort required to remove it. I also stopped respecting clothing purchased for a single performance. I do not mean necessities. I mean the costume purchase, the occasion purchase, the social camouflage purchase, the outfit for one dinner, the hat for one event, the dress for one photo cycle, the shoes for one identity cameo. Those are not clothing decisions. They are approval decisions. This is where the hull leak gets psychological. A one-time outfit is rarely bought with logic. It is bought to relieve a short-term emotional pressure. You want to fit the room. You want to avoid feeling behind. You want to control the impression. But if the item is unlikely to serve you several times, the real purchase is not fabric. It is temporary anxiety relief. And temporary anxiety relief is one of the most expensive products in the modern economy. People call it style. Most of the time it is fear with a price tag. I would rather own fewer things that return repeatedly than more things that serve one social emergency and disappear into a closet. Repetition is where value lives. The same is true in business. The same is true in investing. The same is true in personal finance. Assets that earn once are weaker than assets that earn again. If a purchase cannot prove it deserves a second, third, or fifth use, it has not earned a place on the ship. Entertainment gives people another leak because they rarely price it honestly. They buy subscriptions in monthly numbers and consume them in emotional blur. A sports package does not feel like $1,000 a year because it arrives as a manageable recurring charge. That is why recurring entertainment is so dangerous. It hides the annual truth. A person says, "It is only $80. I hear, "I have decided this deserves 4 figures of my after-tax cash every year." Those are not the same sentence. I am not against entertainment. I am against unconscious entertainment. If you truly use a service 50 hours a month, the cost per hour may be reasonable, but many people keep services for the fantasy version of themselves, the version that watches every game, every channel, every event, every documentary. The real version watches a few scattered hours and keeps paying for abundance they do not use. That is not leisure. That is subscription fog. Fog is costly because it prevents measurement, and anything you refuse to measure will eventually control you. Now, let me move to a leak that is far more dangerous than all the others, because it can erase not only comfort, but principle. Nothing drains financial progress faster than investing in what you do not understand. I have spent a lifetime talking about circle of competence for a reason. The world rewards precision, not curiosity disguised as confidence. Yet people continue to hand money to stories they cannot evaluate. A friend mentions a startup. Someone forwards a deal. A founder sounds persuasive. A new sector appears exciting. A private company promises a breakthrough. The deck looks polished. The numbers look fine. The social proof looks strong. And suddenly a person who would never buy a used washing machine without inspecting it is willing to send $5,000 into a black box because the opportunity sounds exclusive. That is madness dressed up as sophistication. When you invest outside your competence, the loss does not begin when the company fails. It begins the moment you say yes, because from that moment on, you cannot judge what is happening. You cannot separate normal volatility from real deterioration. You cannot tell whether the margins are healthy, whether the market is real, whether the incentives are aligned, whether the valuation is absurd, whether the product solves anything, or whether the company is simply burning hope. You have substituted trust for analysis, and when people do that with money, they call it opportunity. I call it the competence tax. I have no interest in paying the competence tax if I cannot understand how the thing works, what drives its economics, where the risk sits, and what would make it fail. I do not belong in it. That principle sounds restrictive to people who want access to every exciting story. Good restriction is a feature, not a bug. The inability to say no is not openness. It is a leak in character, and leaks in character always become leaks in capital. Even grocery spending can become a leak if you confuse lower unit cost with lower total cost. People love bulk buying because it lets them feel efficient. The warehouse cart is a powerful drug. It gives you the sensation of control, preparedness, abundance, and thrift all at once. But food is not inventory if you cannot consume it before decay gets there. The gallon of milk that expires, the huge slab of meat that goes bad, the giant tray of eggs you never finish, these are not bargains. They are spoiled intentions. This is the inventory leak. Businesses go bankrupt doing the same thing. They buy too much because the per-unit math looks attractive, then discover that storage, spoilage, working capital, and demand timing were part of the real equation. Households do it too, just on a smaller stage. If the lower price leads to higher waste, it was not thrift, it was vanity accounting. You made the spreadsheet feel better while your sink and trash can quietly told the truth. The same cold logic applies to sales. A discount is not a victory, unless the purchase would have happened anyway. That sentence is so simple, and so many people still fail it. A store hangs a 40% sign in the window, and suddenly shoppers start speaking like they won something. They did not save $600. They spent $300 they were not planning to spend. Retailers understand the human mind better than most consumers understand themselves. They know scarcity language, countdown language, seasonal language, and markdown language can overpower judgment. I think of this as the sale trap. It is one of the cleanest examples of how the market monetizes impatience and ego. A person wants to feel smart. The sale lets them feel smart while spending. That combination is lethal. It feels like discipline and indulgence at the same time. That is why it works. If you genuinely need the television, the laptop, the suitcase, and you have already planned the purchase, waiting for the right seasonal discount is rational. But walking into a discount and leaving with a new want is not strategy. It is obedience. Then there is software. Modern consumers bleed money, not because each app is expensive, but because each subscription seems too small to fight. Video calling is a perfect example. At one point, paying for premium access may have made sense if you needed longer meetings or special features, but the world's free alternatives exploded. Competitors improved. The original premium advantage shrank, yet many people kept paying out of inertia. That is the inertia leak. The product is not awful enough to trigger cancellation, so the payment survives by mediocrity. This is how subscription businesses love to live, below your pain threshold and above your attention threshold, not valuable enough to matter, not painful enough to stop, just present enough to keep draining. If you run your financial life that way, you create a graveyard of small permissions, and those small permissions become a large surrender. Extended warranties belong in the same family of fear-based leakage. They are often sold at the moment when your defenses are down. After you have already decided to buy the device, when you are mentally tired and emotionally attached. That is not an accident. The best time to sell fear is right after desire. You are holding the laptop, the television, the appliance, and someone offers a little extra protection for a little extra money. It sounds prudent. It sounds adult. It sounds responsible. But most extended warranties are theater. They are priced to exploit your aversion to future inconvenience. They contain exclusions. They rely on forgotten paperwork. They depend on timing. They profit from the fact that a large number of people either never use them or discover too late that the exact problem is not covered. In plain language, you are often prepaying for a promise that was designed to disappoint you gracefully. I would rather keep the premium in my own pocket and self-insure across repeated decisions than keep buying tiny fear blankets from businesses that understand probabilities better than I do. If you step back, you can see the pattern. The leak is rarely the object itself. The leak is the weak mechanism underneath the purchase: novelty, identity, loyalty, anxiety relief, fog incompetence, vanity accounting, obedience to discount language, inertia, fear packaging, different products, same structural problem. The market is not merely selling you goods, it is selling you permission to stop thinking. That is why ordinary people can earn more and still feel trapped. They think the battle is between income and expenses. It is deeper than that. The real battle is between conscious allocation and automated leakage. A high earner with 10 leaks can feel poorer than a moderate earner with discipline. Salary is linear. Leaks are compounding in reverse. They do not just subtract money. They subtract optionality. They keep you dependent. They reduce refusal power. Refusal power matters more than most people understand. The ability to say no to a bad boss, no to a foolish investment, no to a desperate move, no to social pressure, no to a predatory offer, no to a city you hate, no to a client who drains your life, no to a trend that is eating your cash. That power is built with retained capital. It does not appear because you read a motivational quote. It appears because you stop drilling holes in your own hull. This is where the discussion becomes more than frugality. Frugality by itself is too small an idea. I am not asking you to worship cheapness. Cheap people often make terrible allocators because they save in places that reduce quality and spend in places that inflate ego. I am asking for strategic severity. I am asking you to become ruthless about the difference between cost and leak. Some costs are productive. Some costs buy time, reliability, health, clarity, reputation, and leverage. Those can be wonderful costs. Leaks do the opposite. They weaken the structure without improving the mission. When you remove leaks, you do not merely save the face value of the purchase. You reclaim the return that money could have earned for decades. You reclaim the attention that recurring friction was stealing. You reclaim the shelf space, the calendar space, the emotional bandwidth, and the decision quality that clutter and subscriptions and low-grade obligations quietly occupied. Most households think they need a bigger breakthrough. In many cases, they need fewer leaks. This is also why the smallest decisions deserve more respect than people give them. A person says, "It is just $40 a month," I hear. It is principle leaving the engine every month, losing the ability to compound and training me to tolerate misallocation. A person says, "It was only one event outfit." I hear, "I paid real cash to relieve temporary social pressure." A person says, "I got a deal," I hear. A retailer successfully converted my attention into an unplanned cash outflow. The language you use around money reveals the quality of your operating system. If your operating system is weak, every market actor can reach into your life. The travel platform can reach in, the insurer can reach in, the clothing brand can reach in, the streaming bundle can reach in, the startup pitch can reach in, the warehouse shelf can reach in, the electronics clerk can reach in. None of them need to rob you in one blow. They only need your permission to keep a small valve open. People like to imagine financial collapse as a dramatic event. I have seen something different. For most people, financial weakness arrives as a long sequence of tiny surrenders. Then one day they look up and realize their savings are thinner than they expected. Their investments are smaller than they should be. Their stress is higher than it ought to be, and their choices are narrower than they imagined. They think the problem began that month. It did not. The problem began when they normalized leakage. So I want to leave you with a harsher question than how can I earn more? That is a useful question, but it is not the first one. The first question is this: where is my hull leaking right now? Not in theory, not in general, not one day. Today, which payment is surviving on inertia? Which purchase is flattering my identity instead of serving my life? Which recurring cost have I not repriced? which discount is really a trap, which pile of physical objects is actually unconsumed guilt, which investment am I rationalizing because I want excitement, which convenience is creating more friction than it removes. Most people will not ask those questions honestly because the answers are embarrassing. Good. Embarrassment is cheaper than bankruptcy. Embarrassment is cheaper than 10 years of lost compounding. Embarrassment is cheaper than discovering too late that you built an income and never built control. I am Warren Buffett, and if I could hand ordinary people one practical advantage, it would not be a stock tip. It would be a sharper filter, because the quality of your life is often determined less by the opportunities you chase than by the leaks you refuse. A sound hull gives you time. Time gives you patience. Patience gives you selectivity. Selectivity gives you better investments, better work, better relationships, better decisions. That is how simple discipline turns into strategic freedom. You do not need to leave this conversation and become a different person overnight. You need to prove that you are willing to seal one leak without negotiating with yourself. Cancel one thing, reprice one thing, return one thing, refuse one thing, stop one thing that has been stealing from you in a respectable disguise. Then do it again. Then again. You are trying to become seaworthy, because in the end, there are only two kinds of people. The ones who keep explaining why the water in the boat is normal, and the ones who get on their knees, find the holes, and seal them before the storm gets there. That is the test. Not whether you can admire freedom, whether you are finally willing to stop leaking it.